3 billion gallons of water. That is enough water to fill over 4.5 million Olympic swimming pools. All of it sitting in a 120-year-old earthen dam directly above two Hawaiian towns, as the worst flooding in the state in over 2 decades raged through the streets below. And the private corporation that owns that dam, one of the most recognized food brands on the planet, had been told since 1978 that the spillway holding all of that water was too small to handle a serious storm. The storm came, the water rose, and for several hours on the morning of March 20th, 2026, the question was not whether Hawaii was flooding. The question was whether 2,400 people living below that dam were going to survive it. That is where the story starts. Before we get to the corporate timeline, and we will get there, and the details are worse than what most headlines are saying, here is what actually happened in Hawaii over the last 5 days. 2 back-to-back Kona low storm systems struck the Hawaiian Islands within 1 week of each other. A Kona low is a low-pressure weather system that forms west or southwest of Hawaii and draws warm, moisture-saturated air up from the tropics. Under normal circumstances, they produce rainfall and wind. Under the circumstances Hawaii faced in March 2026, saturated soil from the first storm, an already elevated reservoir, record dry periods preceding the wet season, a second Kona low arriving 7 days after the first one was not just a weather event, it was a compounding crisis on top of a crisis that had not finished. The first Kona low struck Hawaii in mid-March. It produced more than 15 inches of rain across the islands, with Maui's higher elevations receiving the most, over 2 feet. Flooding, landslides, sinkholes, and widespread power outages hit multiple islands. The ground never dried, the soil never absorbed. By the time the second Kona low made landfall on the night of March 19th, moving into March 20th, the state was already saturated and vulnerable. That second storm came in hard and fast. 8 to 12 inches of rain fell on northern Oahu in a single overnight period. Parts of Maui received what amounted to a full year's worth of rainfall in a few days. The city of Kahului on Maui logged its wettest month on record. Honolulu broke a rainfall record that had stood since 1951. In some zones, rain was falling at 1 to 3 inches per hour, a rate that does not allow water to drain, does not allow soil to absorb, and does not allow rivers, streams, or drainage systems to keep pace. What happened next was simultaneous and cascading. Streams throughout Oahu's North Shore surged out of their banks. Kaukanahawa Stream, which flows through the heart of Waialua, turned into a roaring brown river within hours. Homes were lifted off their foundations. Cars were swallowed by water in driveways. Residents in the Waialua neighborhood woke up at 1:30 in the morning to find floodwater already inside their homes. People fled on surfboards. Emergency crews on jet skis navigated through what had been residential streets. Firefighters and lifeguards searched waterways for stranded people. The National Guard was activated. Governor Josh Green described seeing chest-high floodwaters in some areas. By the end of the rescue operations, over 236 people had been pulled from the rising water. 10 of them were taken to hospitals with hypothermia. 72 children and adults at a spring break youth camp on Oahu's west coast, Our Lady of Ke'au Retreat, had to be airlifted to safety by the Honolulu Fire Department and the National Guard. The camp was on high ground, but surrounded by water on every side. There was no road out. And that is where the obvious red starts to fall apart. Most people following this story think it is about extreme weather. 2 storms, back to back, climate change accelerating Kona lows, Hawaii getting hit harder than usual. That is real. That is part of it. The cleaner red is this. The storm activated a structural failure waiting to happen. And the question of whether 2,500 people survived the night on March 20th depended not on the competence of emergency crews. Those crews performed, but on whether a 120-year-old dam that a private corporation had refused to repair was going to hold. Here is the full documented history of the Wahiawa Dam, and it needs to be understood completely to grasp why this event is different from a standard flooding story. The Wahiawa Dam was constructed between 1903 and 1906 to irrigate sugar plantations for the Waialua Agricultural Company. The plantation era created the dam. The plantation era ended. The dam remained. The Waialua Agricultural Company eventually became a subsidiary of Dole Food Company, the same Dole that puts the blue sticker on your bananas, the same Dole that markets pineapple juice to American families. Dole became the private owner of an 88-foot earthen dam holding nearly 3 billion gallons of water above 2 Hawaiian towns. And Dole has owned it ever since. The dam collapsed once before, in 1921. It was rebuilt. The rebuilt structure has been standing for over a century. But the structure that was rebuilt in 1921 was designed using what the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers later described as precedence and experience, not engineering calculations derived from worst-case rainfall scenarios. In 1978, the Army Corps issued a formal report identifying the core problem. The Wahiawa Dam's spillway was undersized. It could not pass the volume of water produced by what engineers call the probable maximum flood, the theoretical worst-case rainfall event for that specific location. The Army Corps said this in 1978. It was documented. It was official. It was in writing. That was 48 years ago. The state of Hawaii continued noting the same problem in annual dam safety reports for decades. In 2009, the chief engineer of Hawaii's Division of Water Resource Management sent Dole a formal letter. The letter told Dole that the reservoir could handle less than half of the required flood flow. It told Dole to lower the water level in the 88-foot reservoir to 65 feet, remove unwanted vegetation, and develop plans to increase and improve the spillway. That was 2009. Dole made some adjustments, but left the spillway untouched. The state issued a second deficiency notice in 2016, a third in 2020, a fourth after that. In 2021, the State Land Board moved to enforce. It fined Dole and a co-owner $20,000 for failing to meet a March 1, 2021 deadline to submit a dam safety permit application. $20,000. The maximum penalty allowed under Hawaii state law for a corporation that owns a high-hazard dam rated as having high-hazard potential, where a failure will result in probable loss of human life. $20,000. But Dole's response to the enforcement action was to say it could not afford the repairs. The company's general manager, Dan Nellis, told the State Land Board that Dole did not have anywhere near the resources it once did. He said, and this was the actual quote, "Pineapple is a hard business." The Land Board rejected Dole's request for relief. Then, 6 months later, the Land Board reversed itself. It began considering a Dole proposal to donate the dam to the state, essentially handing the liability to Hawaiian taxpayers, in exchange for the state agreeing to fund the spillway repairs. The Hawaii legislature authorized that acquisition in 2023. It allocated $26 million, $5 million for the purchase, and $21 million for the repair and expansion of the spillway. But the transfer was not completed as of March 20th, 2026, when the water rose to 85. 29 feet, and emergency sirens went off at 5:35 in the morning. As of that specific moment of near catastrophe, the Wahiawa Dam still belonged to Dole Food Company. The state had allocated the money. The state had passed the law. But the legal transfer had not been finalized. The state board was scheduled to vote on the acquisition in the days following the flood. The crisis arrived before the paperwork did. Now here's the part that is not making most headlines. In 2023, while Dole was claiming it could not afford the dam repairs, while state engineers were saying publicly that the spillway had the potential to kill many people, Dole's parent company reported record income levels. The state's maximum financial penalty for failing to repair a dam that could kill 2,500 people is $20,000. Dole's parent company posted record profits the same year the state offered to hand them $21 million to fix a problem they had ignored since 1978. There is a word for that arrangement. It is not hard business. It is regulatory capture, a system so weak that a private corporation can own a piece of critical public safety infrastructure, ignore documented failure warnings for nearly 5 decades. Pay a fine that amounts to a minor administrative inconvenience, and then negotiate to transfer the liability to taxpayers while retaining the benefit of the irrigation system for as long as it chose to use it. Carly Myers lives in Waialua. She woke up on the night of March 20th at 1:30 in the morning with approximately 1 foot of water already inside her children's playroom. She grabbed her family and drove to Waialua High School, the designated evacuation center. When she arrived, the high school itself was being evacuated because of the threat of dam failure. There was no safe place in the immediate vicinity. She was evacuating from a flood to a shelter that was evacuating because of a dam that nobody responsible had ever properly repaired. She told NBC News, "Seems like most people in other states aren't seeing anything about the floods in the news." She was right about that, too. Kathleen Pahenui, another Wahiawa area resident, described her feelings about the dam in the days before this flood. She said the fear comes back every time it rains. It is a persistent dread that the people living beneath the reservoir carry with every storm season. State engineer Carty Chang, this person who had been most vocal about Dole's failure to act, said at a state land board meeting before this event that the question was not if something would happen. The question was when. That meeting happened before the March 2026 floods. Chang had already seen what was coming, that the dam held. That matters. It needs to be said clearly. The Wahiawa Dam did not fail during this event. Water levels peaked at 85, 29 feet on the morning of March 20th, and then began to recede as the rain moved east. By early Saturday morning, the USGS monitoring gauge showed levels dropping back toward 81. 5 feet. Evacuation orders were lifted. The immediate catastrophe did not occur. But the margin was 71 feet. Less than 3 feet of earthen embankment between survival and a catastrophic collapse of 3 billion gallons into a community that had nowhere to go. Now let's go to Maui. Because Oahu is not the only island in this story. Maui received the largest rainfall totals in the entire state during the first Kona low. Some of Maui's higher elevations received more than 2 feet of rainfall in a single storm event. The second Kona low hit an island that was already completely saturated. In Lahaina, the community on Maui's west coast that was destroyed by the 2023 wildfire that killed over 100 people and is still in the middle of a multi-year rebuilding process, officials issued evacuation warnings as retention basins in the area neared capacity. Flooding destroyed at least one home and a condominium building in Maui County. Emergency rescue operations were conducted in South Maui. Road closures stranded residents across the island. Let that land for a moment. Lahaina is a community that was burned to the ground less than 3 years ago. It lost over 100 residents in a wildfire that also exposed catastrophic failures of emergency warning systems and utility infrastructure. Those residents have been rebuilding, physically, financially, emotionally, in the years since. And the second major disaster in less than 3 years just forced new evacuation warnings on some of the same neighborhoods that survived the fire. A Maui hospital in Kula was among the facilities damaged. Agriculture across the state suffered more than $9. $4 million in confirmed damage, with Oahu farmers reporting over $2, $7 million in crop losses from the floods alone. Governor Josh Green has said the combined damage from both Kona low events will exceed $1 billion. That number includes damage to airports, schools, roads, homes, commercial properties, agricultural operations, and public infrastructure. His chief of staff spoke to the White House and received assurances of federal support. A federal disaster declaration, unlike Nebraska, which is still waiting, appears to be moving forward in Hawaii, given those assurances. But the damage assessment is still ongoing. The full number will likely be larger than the current estimate when it is finalized. Now here is the forward picture. And the risk is not over. The immediate storm threat has passed. Evacuation orders across Oahu and Maui have been lifted. Power has been restored to most affected customers. As of Monday afternoon, fewer than 200 customers remained without power statewide. Crews have shifted from rescue operations to recovery and damage assessment. But a boil water notice remains in effect for North Shore residents due to a contamination risk in the water supply system. Some roads remain closed, and the soil across the state is still saturated, a condition that means even moderate rainfall can trigger flash flooding in drainages and streams with almost no warning time. If weather conditions hold and no additional significant rain systems develop, the recovery process begins immediately. The state estimates it will take weeks to fully assess structural damage to homes, roads, and public facilities, and months for agricultural recovery. The spillway state acquisition vote, which was scheduled for the week after the flood, should in theory accelerate the Wahiawa Dam transfer, now that the near failure has drawn national attention. If that vote proceeds and the transfer is completed, construction on the spillway expansion could begin around September 2025, a timeline that the state had already set and that the storm has now made urgently visible. That is the optimistic scenario. There is a second scenario. Hawaii's Kona low season extends through spring. Another significant storm system is possible before the season ends. The Wahiawa Dam's spillway has not been repaired. The state acquisition is still pending a board vote. If another Kona low develops before the transfer is completed, before any repair work begins, the identical situation repeats. The same 120-year-old dam, the same undersized spillway, the same 3 billion gallons, the same 2,500 people downstream. The conditions that produced the March 20th near failure did not result from a once-in-a-lifetime storm. They resulted from 2 back-to-back storms of the kind that climatologists say are increasing in frequency and intensity as sea surface temperatures in the Pacific continue to rise. And that is the third scenario, the one that should drive this conversation beyond the immediate news cycle. Researchers at North Carolina State University analyzed 552 dam failures across the continental United States. They found that the vast majority failed not in single catastrophic storm events, but after moderate rainfall events occurring one after another over 5 to 30 days, exactly the pattern Hawaii just experienced. The biggest contributing factor in those failures was the amount of water already in a reservoir at the time of the failure event. Wahiawa's reservoir was already elevated from the first Kona low when the second one hit. That is the exact failure pattern the researchers identified. The combination of a structure with a documented undersized spillway, a reservoir already near capacity, and a second storm on already saturated ground is the highest risk scenario in dam safety engineering. Hawaii just lived through that scenario at 85, 29 feet. The dam held. By 71 feet. Climate change is the background condition that makes this increasingly likely to repeat. Experts studying Hawaiian weather patterns have confirmed that the intensity and frequency of heavy rainfall events has increased with human-caused global warming. Kona lows are becoming more intense. The ocean temperatures that fuel them are rising. A dam built in 1906 for sugar plantation irrigation, with a spillway designed by precedence and experience, and never substantially upgraded, is not equipped for the rainfall environment that Hawaii is now entering. The state knows this, engineers know this. The Army Corps of Engineers has known it since 1978. What has not matched the pace of the scientific understanding is the legal and regulatory framework for holding private owners of dangerous public infrastructure accountable before the failure, not after. Everything in this video comes from public sources. Official agency reports, AP, NPR, CBS News, NBC News, CNN, Honolulu Civil Beat, Hawaii Public Radio, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers documentation, USGS monitoring data, and official state and county emergency management records. If you are in an area still affected by the Hawaii flooding, follow the Hawaii Emergency Management Agency and your county emergency management authority. A boil water notice remains in effect for North Shore residents. This channel exists to document what is actually happening. What you do with that information is your choice. The pattern here is not subtle. A private corporation owned a 120-year-old dam in a rapidly changing climate environment. The corporation was warned 48 years ago that the spillway would fail in a major storm. It received 4 deficiency notices, spanning more than a decade. It paid a fine worth less than a mid-range used car. It claimed poverty while its parent company posted record profits. The state offered taxpayer money to fix the problem the corporation had created. The paperwork was not complete when the flood arrived. 2,500 people lived below 3 billion gallons of water, held by a spillway that every engineer involved agreed was inadequate. The dam held. But the holding of the dam is not the resolution of this story. The resolution of this story is the question of what accountability looks like for a private entity that owns dangerous public infrastructure, ignores documented warnings across 5 decades, and walks away from the consequences by handing the liability to taxpayers after the near catastrophe already happened. Here's the question this event puts directly in front of anyone following it. Dole Food Company received 4 deficiency notices over 15 years, and the maximum fine Hawaii's law allows is $20,000 for failing to repair a dam rated as having high hazard potential, where a failure will result in probable loss of human life. Should that law change? And should the executives who made the decision to defer those repairs face personal legal accountability? Yes or no? And what does accountability actually look like when the penalty available to regulators is $20,000? That question is going to the state board that votes on the dam acquisition in the days ahead. It is going to every Hawaiian resident who lives downstream from any of the 132 dams that the state regulates, most of them built for sugarcane irrigation, most of them now aging far beyond their original design parameters. The Wahiawa Dam is not unique in Hawaii. It is the one that made national news this week. The others are still there. If this is the kind of story you follow, not because it is dramatic footage, but because you believe people deserve to know what is actually happening before the next disaster, this channel is where that coverage lives. Subscribe and stay with it. The next story we are tracking involves agricultural and irrigation dam infrastructure across multiple states that receive the same category of Army Corps warnings as Wahiawa, and where no ownership transfer, no repair timeline, and no public accountability process has even begun. The water is still in those reservoirs. The storms are still coming.